Hello and welcome. What does the future look like for India and its environment, more specifically Future Perfect, an installation in an exhibition that promises to answer some of those questions. Martin Wright, the man behind it, is here. Martin, tell us, you've got many scenarios for India from an environmentally, I don't know, I mean, is it positive, not so positive, is it dreadful?
Well, there are lots of positive opportunities. Not everything is going on the right track at the moment. So India faces a lot of challenge in terms of water stress, in terms of climate change, in terms of a looming energy gap, in terms of difficulty of producing enough food. But also for each of those, there's a huge amount of positive activity going on in India.
And can you tell us what those are from your vantage point?
In terms of positive stuff, well, for example, there's a lot of work being done by entrepreneurs who are using new renewable technologies like solar power to help electrify rural India, develop it economically, and help lift people out of poverty at the same time.
Right. So that's energy. What about things like environment, the degradation, and so on?
For sure. Well, there's lots going on in terms of soil conservation, in terms of new ways of growing crops that can be more sustainable but also equally productive as the present ways, but without exhausting the soil, without polluting it through excessive use of agrochemicals and so on. So in a lot of these areas there's lots of positive stuff going on, but there has to be, because the challenges are immense.
And what's happening elsewhere in the world in this space that we can learn from, or countries like India can learn from?
Well, one thing I would say is that India sometimes doesn't realise to what extent it is a leader in this. So I'll come on to what you asked in a second.
Yeah, and I meant really similar environments. I didn't mean necessarily developing to develop, but more sorry, I didn't mean the developed world to the developing. I meant developing to developing.
Yeah, across different parts of the developing world. I think there are a whole lot of grassroots initiatives that are happening. You can look at Africa. There are farmers pioneering new methods of soil conservation in Africa using very, very small little contour dams, which when it rains heavily, as it does in parts of Africa at times of the year, as it does obviously in India during the monsoon, the water is captured and retained by these contour dams, so it trickles down slowly into the soil, helps nourish the plants. You don't get the problem of the rain hitting the soil and then all the water runoff washing away the soil, causing problems of soil erosion, as I was talking about. So there are lots of sort of ideas that can be shared across similar environments, similar regions, similar ecosystems, if you like.
Right. So you said the challenge is really to now scale them, because the problems are immense, and so is the country and the population and so on. So what's happening there and what needs to be done?
In terms of scale, a certain amount, but a lot more needs to be done. There's too much of individual initiatives, little points of light scattered around the country, not enough thought always given to how to scale up. There's opportunities there for business to help pull initiatives together and make a business model out of it, and particularly in energy, that's starting to happen. Much more could be done. There's opportunities as well for government in that, for government to be more of a catalyst in putting the right kind of policies in place that will help encourage these sort of initiatives.
Right. And when you say right policies, do you mean fiscal initiatives or do you mean other forms?
A mixture of things. Sometimes it's fiscal. I'm going to give one small example in which the present government's moving in the right direction. On solar, it's reducing the import tariffs on solar panels coming in from elsewhere, because India can't, at the moment, manufacture enough solar panels to meet its own demand. So those sort of things can make a big difference. Sometimes it's regulatory, so setting more of a level playing field. Sometimes it's looking at ways to address the thorny issue of subsidies.
Right.
Sometimes things that are rather unsustainable are being subsidised quite heavily, while things that are sustainable are being penalised. So there's more that could be done in that direction. Right. I think the new government has been making some of the right noises. It would be lovely if it started following up with even more enthusiasm to push sustainability as a way of lifting people out of poverty in India.
Right, and that's really my next question. Are you seeing sufficient, I mean, this may apply to many countries, are you seeing sufficient discussion and conversation around these issues, critical issues of climate change, about the changing nature of the environment and so on, which then will lead to maybe scale solutions and scale efforts and so on?
I'm not sure about sufficient. I think it's the old thing about there's often more heat than light, as it were. So there can be a lot of discussion around it. You see it in the media, you see it even among government ministers, but sometimes it's not focused enough on saying, okay, this is the problem, this is where India needs to be by 2030, and this would apply to my own country, the UK, it would apply to the States, it would apply to China. This is far from unique to India. But this is where the country needs to be if we're going to lift people out of poverty in a sustainable way, if we're going to position ourselves to deal with the coming resource shocks, the coming climate shocks and so on. How do we get there? What's the sort of positive things that we can do now to plan for the future? And I think there are opportunities to do more of that in India.
Right. So what's the one example that you would hold up which gives you confidence that things are in the right direction, and maybe one which does not?
I think I'm always much happier talking about the positive stuff. I would say in terms of positive stuff, I think the sheer ferment of entrepreneurs delivering solar power to Indian villages. There's a huge number of companies out there, startups, often run by young guys, young women, 20s, 30s, who are delivering solar power and other renewable energy technologies. There are companies doing improved cook stoves, improved chulhas, which makes a huge difference in India. It cuts down the amount of pollution you have in the home, and it cuts down the amount of wood you need to burn to cook your supper. So there's a lot going on there, and it's fired by entrepreneurs as much as, if not more than, to be honest, government policy or aid agencies or whatever.
So that's the good thing.
That's the good thing. I think if you look at the bad thing, I would say the inability sometimes of organizations, including many companies, to learn from best practice. So just to give a quick example, there's a lot of construction going on in India, huge amount of construction going on in India. A lot of it is building buildings, whether it's residential or office buildings, that will use a vast amount of energy in terms of keeping them cool, that will not be designed for energy efficiency. And it's a shame because there are a lot of really good examples in India of how to do that properly. People have been able to demonstrate that you can design energy efficient buildings that cost the same or less than the conventional alternative, and which will cost about 30, 40, 50% even less in terms of running costs, energy bills. So why not learn from these good examples and replicate them rather than just do the same old, because that's the way it's always been done.
Right. And construction is a good example because that is one area where there is so much happening. And hundreds of millions of people whose livelihoods depend on it and so on.
And you've got the government Smart Cities program,
right,
or at least starting to talk about smart cities. It really has an opportunity now to raise the standards, and as part of the Smart Cities initiative, to say, okay, let's design buildings along the best practice of energy efficiency, not the standard conventional practice.
Right, Martin, thank you so much for speaking with us.
You're very welcome. Thank you.